So welcome to 2022 and welcome to the Advantech Virtual Update. I'm your host, Richard Ronth, and in this installment, I get to chat with one of the straightest shooters I've personally had the pleasure to correspond with, the owner and director of PV Automation and creator of Lantori. Pieter de Boer, think of him as the brain who has managed to automate fault finding. Here's the first part of the conversation that we had earlier. Pieter de Boer, thanks for your time joining us today. How are you doing? How is 2022 treating you so far?
Well, so far it's been pretty good, Richard, and thank you very much for being here. Weather's been good, had a bit of holiday, been watching the preliminaries of the tennis, which I think didn't have anything to do with tennis, but that's all right.
Yep.
Reading some books, and started working again last week on IIoT, and it's been really interesting. So there you go. That's 2022 for you so far.
So, yeah, I mean, not much of 22 has actually sort of really had time to take place in terms of the calendar, but it's already turning out to be, or I think what is shaping up to be a pretty interesting year, so to speak. For anyone who I think wants a nice convenient line in the sand from 2021 where it all gets better and goes uphill, I think there's a little bit of a road to go. So I think for the moment we've just got to keep pushing through there. In terms of the books that you're reading, tell us about those.
It's mainly detectives, thrillers, adventures, a bit of science fiction in there. So it's always puzzles that need to be solved. And as you well know, I truly enjoy solving puzzles in professional life as well.
Yes. Well, in the time that we have known each other, through work, you are definitely a bit of a problem solver. You're definitely a little bit of a puzzle hunter, and I think that actually sort of gives us a nice introduction, to what I really want to sort of talk to you about today with regards to Lantory. Now, this is one of the things that I actually sort of found on your website here specifically. I know that we spend a bit of time going back and forth about taglines, and the one on your website is, "Nobody likes people who find fault with everything. We're the exception." So, Pieter, do you really like going through and nitpicking and finding people's problems?
No, not like that. Not with people. I mean, they normally announce themselves loud and clear anyway, so that's not my job. Yeah, I really enjoy solving problems for people. Okay?
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
That has always been the type of work I've done professionally. Most people call me when they have a problem and they want me to fix it. And then the trick is to do that as quickly and as efficiently as possible. That's where the fault finding comes from.
Yeah. So with regards to fault finding, you're the person who's really, in a very, very big way, you've managed to automate fault finding, or at least automate the process of, let's say, finding the faults. And that's where we sort of get to Lantori. So it's something that you've been working on for quite some time now. How long have you been developing it, and what was really the driving force behind it?
Okay. I think I got this brainwave sometime in 2014. And the brainwave went as follows. This is the type of work I do. I work in industrial automation, and we all know that industrial automation equipment and systems are pretty robust. Nevertheless, we also know that at some stage something will break down. The problem is we never know what will break down when and where the actual fault is, whether it's wiring, whether it's a component, whether it's a PLC that's playing up, you don't know. So you've got all these variables that you need to play with. And I'm thinking, gee, it's really an incredibly wide scala of stuff that I work with when I'm doing my job. I mean, there's the SCADA systems, HMI systems that I need to be familiar with, including how you configure them, how you find things in there. Then there's the PLC, the software, the hardware that goes with it. Then there's the wiring, then there's the field equipment that goes with it. And it all comes together in the work that I do. I bring that whole scala of information and knowledge to the problem that I attend. And I'm thinking, gee, that's a lot. How do you actually connect all these bits? And I'm thinking, well, in my mind, in my brain, this is what I do. These are the steps I take. That's the etc. And that's how I do it. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could actually photocopy myself, replicate myself, and get this done in an automated fashion? Because when I get to site, normally people have already been working on it for at least a good couple of hours. So production has been down, people are edgy. It's not really a good environment to be in. I'm thinking, if I could automate myself into a product, then that product could be on site, ready to use when the problem arises. And then this whole pressure cooker situation that normally arises doesn't get there. So it's a much quicker and easier and more comfortable way of actually fixing a fault that you know at some stage will actually occur.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the concept of Lantori came from. And then I look at it and I go, you've got quite a few variables there, Peter, to play with. It's a bit much. Maybe you're being slightly too ambitious here. And as I started to analyze it, I actually found out that there is a pathway of doing it, and Lantori is the end result of that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. Especially from, identifying, the problem and then trying to systematically figure out what that sort of turns into, and then to grow that solution into a product. I definitely think that makes a lot of sense. And when it comes to what you've been able to do there, I definitely think that people would probably really want to know a little bit more. So, just taking a bit more of a look at it, Lantory does 3 specific things. And once again, this, comes from your website. This is the type of thing which people can actually sort of see, where Lantory does, the identification, it specifies and it rectifies. So, from your side, how about we go through those? How does Lantory actually sort of do those 3 things?
Okay. The 3 things you've got there, the identify, specify, and rectify, those are the 3 steps that you need to go through when you need to solve a problem on site. Okay. And Lantori and the people on site together go through those 3 steps. So the identification thing normally is the hardest bit. And what I will say is this: when you get an alarm line on your screen, that does not translate seamlessly into, okay, this is the circuit that I need to look at. No one has got that information because all these systems are bespoke. They're custom made, and therefore they haven't had the opportunity to create a fault resolution list that covers everything. So what we do with Lantori is the following. You get your alarm line on your screen. We understand the logic in the PLC or the DCS system that sits behind that. And we know which inputs and outputs are actually part of that whole thing. So we then also know within Lantori where these devices are, so we can very quickly, within a few seconds, literally from pressing a button on your screen, we can then show the user the circuits that they're interested in. So if you've got 100 or 1,000 pages, let's say 1,000 pages of circuit diagrams, and it would take you quite a long time to actually go through that. With Lantori, we isolate the few circuits that you're really interested in. And then we allow you to seamlessly navigate that whole circuit and the total drawing set as you require to find the actual fault, the real component that is faulty. But Lantori gives you from a silly alarm line on your screen, if you may call it that, to a complete circuit that you know that the fault will be in. So then all of a sudden, the skill set that I bring to fault finding solution, or rather fault finding situation, disappears because Lantori takes that place. So the people on site, the maintenance people, the electricians and all that, they're totally capable of then doing what they need to do. So that's the identification part of it. Then you get to specification because you found out what's wrong, you found out what is faulty. And if it is a component, if it is a loose wire, which happens as well, then obviously you don't have to specify. The rectification process is simple. You grab a screwdriver, you put the wire in, you tighten it up, and that's it, finished, job done.
Yeah.
If you've got a component that's actually faulty and it might actually have burnt, which is not really a great thing, you can't read the part number on it anymore. You don't know what it is. So that's where the specification part comes in. We can bring into Lantori a complete component list, part list of your whole system. So if we know that this particular part, say proximity switch 1, 2, 3 is faulty, then you can look in the parts list what proximity switch 1, 2, 3 actually is, and we specify it's that brand, it is that type, it is that whatever, and you're done. You can find the replacement one, and that's when you get to the rectification part. You need to take that proximity switch, you install it, and then the whole situation has been rectified. So that's where the identify, specify, and rectify comes from.
I mean, we are here, automatically or using automation to be able to, using information to be able to find those, potential problems that do creep up within processes. I think I think you've covered that really, really well. So one of the other things, that we've discussed a little bit back and forth over time is that Lantori can work with all of the electrical, pneumatic, hydraulic, basically any sort of instrumented system out there. Is there anything that you've found that Lantori doesn't support or wouldn't necessarily work with? So in a simple question, are there any sort of limitations that you've come across with it?
The answer is not yet, Richard. But then again, how far do you push your boundaries? In my view, when we're talking about automation systems, okay, because that's what we're talking about, right? Then you've essentially covered all the type of different documentation and technologies that you will find. If you talk technology, it's either going to be electrical, hydraulic, or pneumatic. And if it's not, then I probably haven't seen it yet. So that's okay. Then when you talk about these three different technologies, then obviously you got schematic diagrams, and that's similar for electrical, hydraulic, and pneumatic, despite the fact that the drawing methodology is different between them, but that's okay. They're still on a drawing, they've still got a grid, they've still got a system that allows us to understand where these components live on the drawings, and therefore we can guide the users to where they need to be. Same thing with P&ID, can do them as well. So it really depends on what the user would need to complete their task. But in reality, what I've seen, electrical drawings, hydraulic and pneumatic would be quite sufficient. And Lantori can ingest them, and we can then get the user to get to them when they need it. And that
For
makes
sure. So now let's have a look at our product feature. We're going to get back to our conversation in just a moment, but now it's time for our feature product. And for this virtual update, the range that we're highlighting is the EKI 7700 range of managed Ethernet switches. And here are just some of the highlights. Ranging from 4 through to 24 ports, many of the available units come with 802.3AF or an AT power over Ethernet ports, where the 24 port switches are also in the EKI 7400 range. Many of these switches also accommodate SFP or small form factor pluggable transceiver sockets for easy and flexible fiber expansion. They also feature redundancy with X-Ring Pro, which offers ultra high speed recovery time in the order of less than 20 milliseconds. Also, they have the IXM function fast deployment, where this is one of the key features, particularly for high volume deployments. So the IXM tool is an industrial Ethernet switch solution to help users deploy industrial Ethernet switch hardware by allowing users with multiple managed switches in the field to eliminate the need for individually connecting each device in order to configure it. When it comes to the security side, they also offer 802.1x based security. So at each port, you're looking at MD5, TLS, TTLS, and PEAP encryption. On the management side, they also feature SNMP version 1, version 2C, version 3, web, telnet, standard MIB, and private MIB functionality. Many of the wide temperature units also range between -40 through to 70 degrees wide range operating temperature, and they also offer dual power input ranging between 48 through 57 volt DC power inputs, and also a relay output for a single circuit failure. So if these products are of something that is of interest to you, or you have a need that you need to fulfill, have a project that you're looking to explore, we are offering a special project registration code below. So the registration code for this time around is Ethernet-90, where you can register your project with us within the next month. The dates are below in the description, and have 12 months to place your orders with us for a 10% discount on Advantech products. Terms and conditions do apply, so make sure to check those out with your sales manager. Now, in additional news, as we mentioned in the previous installment when we were talking about our feature product, the ICR 3232, it still currently has a very long lead time due to component shortages, namely from Texas Instruments, which the part in question is a power regulator, which is currently pushing the lead time out to 2023 as this goes live. There had been a temporary workaround for this involving the use of an alternate power regulator, but the chip itself, which had a cost of around about $5 on its own with some added manual cost to get it into the systems, we have received some details from our European colleagues that these chips are now selling at up to around about $350 on the open market. So this workaround is no longer being offered. As this gets published, the team behind the ICR 3200 series are going through a redesign to eliminate the dependence on the Texas Instrument chips. And so far, this looks like it might get production back up by around about April, but there is still currently the need to get parts from the open market without stable supply, which would also require the unit to be recertified. So although there are some plans in the works, there's still plenty happening with no guarantees on delivery times or product schedules. So for now, let's get back to our conversation with Pieter de Boer from PB Automation. Considering what Lantori can do, and in terms of, the more information that you sort of feed it, the better it becomes. It's like a lot of systems out there. As far as an application that can identify, let's say, the location of a fault, how much benefit can it provide? Now, when I ask that, I mean, we've already sort of covered that identification, that specification, that rectification process. But in terms of a business case, when it comes to man hours involved, when it comes to machine downtime, how much does it potentially offer, let's say, a small to medium enterprise, or if we were to scale that up to, you know, a larger organization, do you have any sort of projections or, you know, any sort of scenarios that you'd be able to offer in terms of what Lantori can offer?
Yeah, I do. I've actually got two.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is something that happened on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
We installed Lantory there, and it was actually quite successful. The report we got back was that they saved about, what was it? Yeah, they saved about 8 times 30 minutes in a month, which is about 4 hours in a month of production time. Okay. And that may not look like a hell of a lot, but their actually earnings were about $5,000 an hour.
Right.
If you do your numbers, that's $240,000 a year. So that actually is quite significant.
Yeah, and especially from the commercial side of things, you know, I think a lot of people out there probably aren't necessarily willing to admit it in this sort of day and age, and you know the climate that we're in. But it, you know, it all does come down to dollars and cents.
Yeah, exactly right. And another fun one I had was I got this phone call, and the person identified himself, and he says, I've got this problem. We've been at it for 4 hours now, and the electrician simply can't find it. We're looking at all the right stuff, but he's not getting there. And they go, well, have you actually invoked Lantory? And he goes, well, I can't find a password. And I'm thinking, well, that's unusual. So I logged remotely into their system. I then found the alarm line. I invoked Lantory, and within 15 minutes, the problem was found and fixed. The real problem was that this electrician they had there hadn't paid 100% attention, and he was in the wrong equipment box. So despite the fact that the numbering looked the same, it wasn't. He was simply in the wrong spot. With Lantory, that doesn't happen. So that was a good one. And the final one was
so that there, just to interrupt you there. Yeah, the electrician was already working for around about 4 hours before they contacted you, and Lantori basically found it within 15 minutes. So that's 16 to 1 saving.
Yeah.
And because that 4 hours, that would have kept going.
Yeah. The saving is better than that, Richard, because in the 4 hours he hadn't found it yet.
And exactly by what you were saying in terms of where he was looking, that was just going to keep going.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think we're starting to come up with, you know, some pretty powerful arguments there, you know, for at least this to be a very, very serious consideration, you know, where there's a lot of instrumentation and a lot of process going on.
Absolutely. And the other thing you need to consider is that because we use Lantori with circuit diagrams, you can see all the wiring, all the cabling, that's all included. And if you've got a small compact machine nowadays, a lot of people still use remote I/O, and therefore the amount of wiring is minimal. But if you've got a decent sized plant, like for instance, an LNG plant with LNG trains and things like that, these damn things are a couple of 100 meters long. I think it's about 300 meters, thereabouts. Yeah, about 300 meters long. All your cabling is there. It'll take you a little while to find all the cables, all the junction boxes, all the equipment boxes, all the equipment you need, and the right spot in them. So yeah, if you've got a tool like Lantori, it really very quickly guides you through that. You don't have to muck about.
It really does sound like, yeah, the operation team's best friend. Yeah. In I think it's probably, you know, by the conversation that we're having right now, it's probably the closest thing to putting a great big neon sign out there somewhere in a plant saying the fault is here. Yeah, and this is exactly what you need to replace it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right about that. This morning I was again thinking about all the different taglines that we come up with over the time, and none of them really matches it. And this morning I thought, really, it's a tool. and that's all it is. But it's a very, very powerful tool because, as we've discussed it works on multiple levels. It definitely works on a financial level. There is no doubt about that. We've proven that. But it also works on an emotional and human level, whereby it makes people's life a lot easier. I mean, if you're fed up and you need to undo a nut and you simply don't have the right tool, the right spanner for that, then you're in trouble. If you're, in this case, like an electrician, and you need to go and fight this fault that has come up and your whole production line has stopped, you need another tool, and that tool is Lantori.
No, and that's, I think that's a really, really good way for you to be able to really present it, because I mean, look, I say this as a person who sort of supports industry, not necessarily works in industry. Everything out there is a tool, where everything has to have a certain value, and this looks to have all of the sockets and different types of leverage on it in order to be able to sort of get things done for the people who are out there actually doing it. So, look, I know we're probably sort of going through a little bit of your time today, and once again, sort of thanks for giving us what you have so far. I do have one question left for you that I'd really like to cover, and that is, what's next for Lantori? Where do you see it going? How far can it go?
That's a lovely question, Richard, and I can take that anywhere. In reality, it's, in a way, the sky is the limit, right? So as long as you've got an automation system that needs to be serviced, then we can do that. How far can you take it? Well, I think the three aspects that we've spoken about, the identification, the specification, and then the rectification. The last thing Lantori would be able to help with as well, in a way, because you could actually put instructions into Lantori that would guide the users through how you need to go about replacing that particular part. Some of them are really easy, other ones are harder. I honestly don't know, Richard. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, even Elon Musk could consider this for his cars and for his, what's the word?
For his trucks, for his shuttles.
Yeah, for his shuttles and all that. Yeah. So you could use it anywhere, as long as it sort of creates as long as it fixes the problems that the people have.
No, I think that's definitely probably the best way of putting it. And who knows, maybe the next step will be probably something completely unexpected in terms of something that comes from the market. So
it probably will be, because whichever way you look at it, we think of stuff, but most of the time what we think of is guided or sort of happens because of the information that people put to you.
For sure. Well, look, Peter, I want to take this opportunity right now to thank you very much for the time that you've been able to give us today. I think it's been an incredible insight in terms of to show us a little bit more about what Lantori is and what it can offer people. And I'm sure we'll definitely be talking in future. And thanks very much for the opportunity to talk today.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for inviting me and for the opportunity to tell a little bit more about Lantori. And if people are interested, they can definitely contact me. Thank you.
And we'll definitely be putting your information in the comments below, in the description below. So now it's time to have a look at some of the things that are happening around Advantech directly. Now that we are in 2022 and with the current pandemic situation, we are currently not accepting customers into the Melbourne office. So all orders that have been placed with us will be sent via our regular freight services or only through click and collect only. So if you are looking to do a click and collect, make sure to arrange it with your sales contact first, as there are limited staff rotating through the office at this time. So let's move forward to our question from industry. And this time we're looking at the question of, are industrial computers actually different from commercial grade ones? Now, what makes this question so good is that the answer is both yes and no. So here are some of the answers behind it. From a technical point of view, the underlying tech is fundamentally the same. So if you were to put a commercial or an equivalent industrial system side by side, you'd find that they're very similar or potentially in fact the same from a tech point of view. But there are some aspects that do separate them. The first is that when they get released, commercial systems are released very quickly once the tech behind them becomes widely available to the market. Whereas an industrial system will usually come available to market around about 6 to 9 months later. And that's because they go through a longer validation process, and this leads to our next point, where the second differentiator is the longer term availability. So once an industrial computer has been finalized and validated, its life cycle, that is ultimately dictated by component suppliers, is scheduled to be run and supported for around about 3 to 5 years, offering industry much more stability in the applications where these systems are deployed and may need like-for-like replacements in the event of hardware damage or failure, whereas commercial grade systems may already be superseded or starting to be go through the end of life stage. So to close it off, I really hope that you've enjoyed this. At Advantech, we'd love to know your thoughts, so by all means, post your comments below, and we have links to Lantori, the EKI 7700 series, in the description. If anyone has anything for Pieter de Boer, you can contact him by tagging him in the comments below or engaging through Lantori's contact page in the comments. I'd like to thank our special guest, Pieter from PB Automation, Lantori, for his time and insight into Lantori. It was a great chat, and to all of you, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.